The first UFC pay-per-view of 2023 and the return to Brazil is in the books. In what felt like a passing of the torch fight for the Brazilian fighters, waving goodbye to the old guard and saying hello to the new, we have seen the landscape of many divisions change in the UFC. With brilliant fights throughout the night, amazing stoppages, and some historical moments, UFC 283 was a good card, which will go down in history as one of the best Brazil cards of all time. So let's recap it. This is the Fight franchise and the recap and the review of UFC 283. The early prelims would see 3 decisions and 3 stoppages. The 3 decisions would be Josiane Nunes versus Zara Santos, with Josiane Nunes taking her record to 11-1, defeating the much bigger Zara Santos, showing her brilliant striking, showing that she can be a real problem and bolstering that women's featherweight division. Nicholas Dalby and Wally Alves would scrap at welterweight, with Nicholas Dalby securing the split decision win, and Cody Stamann would defeat Luan Lacerda in a unanimous decision victory. 3 guys, however, in the early prelims stole the show. Daniel Marcos got a brilliant victory over Simon Oliveira, scoring a brilliant KO with a knee to the body and then finishing him off with some brutal punches. Jailton Almeida kept his brilliant streak from last year going, defeating Shamil Abdurakhimov with a brilliant TKO victory in the second round. But it was Ismail Bonfim who stole the show, knocking out Terence McKinney with a brilliant flying knee, which at the moment and already at the start of the year is front runner for KO of the year. Both Bonfim and Almeida would secure Performance of the Night bonuses from their brilliant performances and knockouts. The prelims would be great, with 4 fights and all 4 fights finishing via stoppages. This would see 2 submission victories and 2 knockouts. Gabriel Bonfim would secure a first round submission victory over Munir Lazez. Thiago Moises would also secure a brilliant victory, a submission in the second round over Costa. Credit to Costa, who was a short notice replacement for this fight and showed real heart and grit throughout the fight. However, in the middleweight division, we saw a debuting Bruno Ferreira, who is known for his brilliant jiu-jitsu, facing off against Gregory Rodriguez, aka Robocop. The fight would take place on the feet, with both fighters trading back and forth shots. With the end of the round coming, Gregory Rodriguez would pressure Bruno Ferreira. Bruno would fake a left and a right hand, rolling his shoulders, and then throw a beautiful left hand which knocked Gregory Rodriguez out cold. This was a brilliant knockout and a brutal knockout which showed Bruno Ferreira isn't just a jiu-jitsu player. He has heavy hands and can knock out people that get in the cage with him. The future looks bright for Bruno Ferreira. The one caveat I would say for him, he did look small in the octagon and does seem to have a small frame for the middleweight division. Maybe in future we may see him drop down to welterweight. The final fight on the prelims ended up being a sad affair, as we saw Mauricio Shogun Rua in his final fight in the UFC, taking on Ukrainian Ihor Potera. Shogun didn't look bad in this fight, actually clipping Potera on multiple occasions. As a 40-year-old, he just looked slower than his younger opponent, with Potera bouncing in and out with great striking. Shogun was catching Potera, but not as frequent as Potera was catching him. Towards the end of the round, Potera would catch Shogun, with Shogun going to the ground and being stopped by a flurry of punches. This was sad to see, a legend of the mixed martial arts world being finished and not finishing on a victory. Shogun did give a brilliant speech to his fans in Brazil, and will ride off into the sunset as a legend of the UFC. For all that he gave the MMA world from Pride all the way till now, thank you Shogun for a legendary career, and especially that fight versus Dan Henderson. Before I get into the main card, it was announced that Jose Aldo will be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, which is well deserved for the legendary Brazilian. One of the greatest featherweight champions of all time, from the WEC all the way to the UFC, Jose Aldo is one of the most legendary MMA fighters of all time. Often remembered for his loss to Conor McGregor, it's brilliant to see the fans and the UFC appreciate him and what he brought to the mixed martial arts world. From his brilliant wins over Chad Mendes, Uriah Faber, what Aldo was able to do in the mixed martial arts world was truly amazing. It is brilliant to see the King of Rio get his flowers and be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. The main card kicked off with Johnny Walker versus Paul Craig. An interesting fight in the light heavyweight division. The fight started and Johnny Walker looked different. He looked to have a more measured approach, fighting more tactically. We hadn't seen this side of Johnny Walker before. Johnny Walker normally would be much more reckless, throwing big punches, huge kicks and flying knees. Johnny Walker opted to throw more feints and spent the time reading his opponent. This led to a cagey affair with both guys trading shots and trying to find the better openings on each other. Johnny Walker would throw a kick which was caught by Paul Craig. Paul Craig would hold on to the leg of Johnny Walker, but Johnny Walker would throw hands while his leg was being held, rocking Paul Craig and dropping him, finishing Paul Craig on the ground while Paul Paul Craig held on to Johnny Walker's leg, securing the TKO victory in the first round. This was a brilliant win for Johnny Walker, as this was the first time we had seen him win with such a measured approach. I hope we see much more of this Johnny Walker going forward, as he could be a real contender at light heavyweight, as he already has the power and the capability and the skills. He is just missing that fight IQ, and it seems like John Kavanagh is working wonders with Johnny Walker. Jessica Andrade would face Lauren Murphy and will put on a clinic. This was one of Jessica Andrade's greatest performances in the UFC, defeating a tough Lauren Murphy, destroying her with power striking, with Lauren Murphy having no answer for Jessica Andrade's pressure. It was unfortunate Andrade didn't secure the stoppage victory, with many fans claiming on many occasions the ref should have stepped in, or even Lauren Murphy's corner should have thrown the towel in. Nonetheless, Andrade put on a showcase for the Brazilian fans and showed that she could go for another title run. Gilbert Burns faced a game Neil Magny, with Gilbert Burns doing his best Khamzat Chimaev impression, taking down Neil Magny early and controlling him on the ground and submitting him, taking no damage. This was a brilliant performance by Gilbert Burns, showing the level he is at the welterweight division, showing he is at the top of the food chain. Gilbert off the back of this deserves a big fight, whether against Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington or Bilal Muhammad. A win against them should get him back in the title picture, and it wouldn't surprise me at the end of the year if he does earn a title shot, as another good victory or a rematch against Khamzat Chimaev. Gilbert is once again within touching distance of a UFC title shot. The co-main event saw the first in UFC history, a quadrilogy taking place. Brandon Moreno rematched Davidson Figueiredo once again. In a much more different fight than their last three, Brandon Moreno opted to wrestle from the get-go, taking Davidson Figueiredo down from the very beginning, with the fight being back and forth on the ground with great scrambles and on the feet with great striking back and forth. With many fans saying Brandon Moreno was up on the scorecards, and some saying it was even with Davidson Figueiredo taking a round and Brandon Moreno taking a round, it was even going into the third round. Moreno and Figueiredo would strike and fight each other back and forth on the feet, and then Brandon Moreno would land a vicious punch on Figueiredo. Figueiredo instantly pleaded with the ref off this punch, as his eye was hurt. Figueiredo would go down off this punch and Moreno would get on top and finish the round brilliantly. Upon getting up, Figueiredo's eye was swollen and pretty much shut. This would see the doctor step in before the fourth round and finish the fight, as he didn't see Figueiredo fit to continue. Moreno won off a doctor stoppage. This was an unfortunate end to the quadrilogy. To finish via an unfortunate injury, this isn't how many fans wanted it to finish, with Figueiredo announcing he is moving up to bantamweight and he is done at flyweight, and Brandon Moreno most likely to defend his title against Alexander Pantoja. This has been one of the best rivalries the UFC has ever seen. Back and forth over the last few years, it was just a shame this is how it ended. But hopefully the flyweight division can move on now and we get some great contenders coming up and some great title fights going forward. As for Figueiredo, there is some great matchups at bantamweight for him, and it's going to be fun seeing him fight there soon. The main event saw Jamahal Hill versus Glover Teixeira. This was a brilliant fight and the fight of the night. With back and forth striking and action throughout the fight, Glover showed brilliant toughness, but Jamal showed he is just too athletic and young for Glover to handle. With Glover going for 17 takedowns and only securing 2, showed the level which Hill is at. On the feet in terms of the boxing, Jamal was too much for Glover, throwing vicious head kicks on multiple occasions which rocked Glover. This led to a fight which Hill dominated, winning the first 4 rounds. Going into the 5th, Glover needed a stoppage. Glover would be brilliant in the 5th round, securing a takedown. With many fans thinking this would be the moment he could finally secure the submission victory, he would be brilliant on top of Hill, smothering him and trying to secure the submission. However, it never came, with Hill reversing the position and getting back on top of Glover. Landing some brilliant punches and elbows, he opted to stand up and bring Glover back up to his feet, with the fight finishing on the feet, with Hill landing some brilliant jabs and moving. The fight would go all 5 rounds and Hill would win the unanimous decision. Hill showed he is at the top of the food chain of the light heavyweight division, and though yes, people will call him a paper champ as he is yet to fight Yuri, that fight is going to be amazing coming soon. As for Glover, he ended up hanging up the gloves, retiring at the end of the fight, saying he is too tough for his own good, opting to move on from his career and focus on coaching and helping those coming up in his camp. Glover is a true legend of the sport, winning the title, being the 2nd oldest person to ever win a UFC title. He fought back from adversity on multiple occasions and showed what is possible when you never give up. This brought a bittersweet end to a brilliant night of fights. Overall, the card was brilliant, showcasing the future of Brazilian talent in the UFC, with brilliant stoppages, 2 new champions being crowned, brilliant victories and stoppages throughout the night, and waving goodbye to the old guard of Brazil. Overall, this card was great, and it will be very difficult for the next card of the UFC to top this. Hopefully it does, as we saw a KO of the year contender, brilliant knockouts throughout the night, and so far one of the best fights of the year. UFC 283, if we were going to grade it, gets a B+. Let's just hope future Brazil cards are going to be as fun as this one. Did you enjoy the video? Let us know down in the comments below. What did you think of UFC 283? Did you enjoy the card as much as I did? And what was the best moment of the night for you? Put it down in the comments. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video and subscribe for more fight content coming soon. If you enjoy football, check out our football channel, The Football Franchise, for football content on there. We hope you enjoyed the video and we'll catch you in the next one.